The Roman Empire did not rise to greatness by mere chance. It was built on the backs of men who were relentless, cunning, and often ruthless in their pursuit of victory. In the ancient world, conquest was not simply about acquiring land. It was about reshaping the political map, rewriting history, and leaving an imprint so deep that it echoed for centuries. The Roman generals who led legions into battle were more than just military leaders. They were architects of empire, masters of psychological warfare, and political tacticians who understood that fear could be as potent a weapon as the sword. These 5 men, whose names became synonymous with power, crushed rebellions, destroyed entire civilizations, and expanded the borders of Rome to unimaginable lengths. They were not bound by modern ideas of morality or humanitarian restraint. To them, mercy was a tool, something to be granted sparingly, if at all, and loyalty was earned through blood and iron. Our journey will take us across the dusty battlefields of Gaul, the deserts of North Africa, the mist-covered plains of Britannia, and the turbulent eastern provinces. We will witness sieges that lasted for months, ambushes that decimated armies overnight, and strategies so daring that they remain studied in military academies today. Rome's success lay not only in its disciplined legions, but in the vision and brutality of the men who commanded them. Some were celebrated as heroes by the Senate and the people, while others were feared as tyrants. Yet, each of them played a pivotal role in turning a small city-state into a superpower that dominated the known world for centuries. In this exploration, we will uncover their origins, their greatest campaigns, and the methods both honorable and dishonorable that they used to achieve their aims. But, as you will see, their victories often came with a price, and their legacies were sometimes as controversial as they were glorious. Julius Caesar's name is etched into the very fabric of history, a man whose ambition, political genius, and military brilliance propelled him from an aristocratic youth to the ruler of Rome. His conquest of Gaul, which lasted from 58 BCE to 51 BCE, remains one of the most extraordinary military campaigns ever undertaken. When Caesar took command of the Roman forces in Gaul, the region was a patchwork of warring tribes, each fiercely independent yet vulnerable to a united assault. Caesar saw an opportunity not only to secure Rome's northern borders but also to amass personal wealth and political power. He moved with speed, striking at tribes before they could form alliances. His strategy was simple yet devastating: divide and conquer. By pitting rival chieftains against one another, he ensured that no unified front could challenge Roman supremacy. The Siege of Alesia in 52 BCE stands as his crowning achievement. The Gallic leader Vercingetorix had rallied a massive force to resist the Roman invasion. Caesar, outnumbered, responded with one of the most audacious engineering feats of the ancient world: a double line of fortifications encircling Alesia to trap the defenders, while also protecting against a relief army approaching from outside. For weeks, the Romans withstood fierce attacks, hunger, and the elements. In the end, Vercingetorix surrendered, marking the fall of Gaul and securing Caesar's place as one of history's greatest commanders. But Caesar's ruthlessness was legendary. After battles, he often sold tens of thousands into slavery and executed entire garrisons that resisted too long. His aim was to send a message. Rome rewarded loyalty but annihilated defiance. His soldiers adored him for his charisma, his willingness to share in their hardships, and his generous distribution of spoils. The Senate, however, grew increasingly wary of his power. Caesar's military conquests gave him unmatched political leverage. Crossing the Rubicon in 49 BCE, an act of open rebellion sparked a civil war that would end with him as the dictator of Rome. His reign was short-lived, cut down by assassins on the Ides of March, but his military legacy endured. He had expanded Rome's reach, redefined its military tactics, and demonstrated that a single man, with vision and ruthlessness, could reshape the fate of an empire. Before Scipio Africanus rose to prominence, Rome had met its match in Carthage, a maritime superpower whose armies under Hannibal had humiliated Roman legions for years. Hannibal's crushing victory at Cannae in 216 BCE left Rome in shock, its legions decimated and its allies wavering. Many believed the Republic was on the brink of collapse, but Scipio, a young and relatively untested commander, emerged as the man who would turn the tide. Scipio's rise was fueled by both talent and circumstance. Surviving the disaster at Cannae as a teenager, he swore an oath before the gods that he would not rest until Carthage was defeated. His charisma, strategic vision, and political cunning won him the trust of soldiers and senate alike. But it was his unorthodox thinking that truly set him apart. While other commanders focused on defending Italian soil, Scipio proposed something radical: take the fight to North Africa itself. His campaign against Carthage was a masterclass in logistics, diplomacy, and battlefield innovation. Landing in North Africa in 204 BCE, Scipio allied with Numidian forces under Massinissa, securing the cavalry advantage Hannibal had long enjoyed. He drilled his legions relentlessly, integrating Roman discipline with the swift, mobile tactics of his Numidian allies. The climax came at the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE. Hannibal, recalled from Italy, faced Scipio on the open plains. The Carthaginian war elephants, terrifying beasts that had crushed Roman lines in earlier battles, were neutralized through disciplined gaps in the Roman formation. Numidian cavalry harassed Carthaginian flanks, while Roman infantry pressed forward in disciplined waves. By day's end, Hannibal was defeated, Carthage sued for peace, and Rome stood as the unrivaled power of the Western Mediterranean. Scipio's ruthlessness emerged not in wanton slaughter, but in the terms of Carthage's surrender. Stripped of its navy, forbidden from waging war without Roman approval, and forced to pay massive reparations, Carthage was reduced to a shadow of its former self. Scipio returned to Rome hailed as a hero, earning the title Africanus. Yet, his political career was plagued by jealous rivals, and he eventually withdrew from public life in frustration. Even so, his legacy was immense. Scipio had demonstrated the value of taking bold, strategic risks, forging alliances, and adapting enemy tactics for Roman use. His victory over Hannibal was not just a military triumph, it was the moment Rome secured its path to imperial domination. By the late 2nd century BCE, Rome faced a crisis unlike any it had seen before. Barbarian invasions from the north threatened Italy itself, and Rome's citizen-based army was struggling to meet the challenge. The Republic's traditional recruitment system, relying on land-owning citizens, could no longer field the massive, sustained forces needed to defend the empire's expanding borders. Into this void stepped Gaius Marius, a man whose reforms would transform the Roman military forever. Marius was not born into the aristocracy. Hailing from humble origins in Arpinum, he rose through the ranks on merit, earning a reputation as a relentless soldier and a capable commander. His chance for glory came when the Senate entrusted him with the war against Jugurtha in Numidia. Marius proved his mettle, but it was his later campaigns against the Germanic tribes, the Teutones, and the Cimbri that would cement his place in history. Recognizing that Rome needed a larger, more flexible military, Marius broke with centuries of tradition. He opened army enlistment to the Capetcensi, the poorest citizens, who previously had been excluded from military service. In doing so, he created a standing professional army whose loyalty was tied directly to their commander, who paid their wages, provided equipment, and promised land after service. This reform not only increased manpower but also fundamentally changed the relationship between soldier and state. His tactical innovations were equally significant. Marius standardized weapons and armor, reorganized legions into cohorts for greater flexibility, and improved logistical systems to ensure faster movement and supply. His legions became hardened, mobile, and capable of enduring long campaigns in hostile territory. The Battle of Aquae Sextiae in 102 BCE showcased his genius. Facing the massive Teutonic force, Marius used terrain to his advantage, concealing a portion of his troops in the hills to ambush the enemy at the critical moment. The result was a slaughter that effectively ended the Germanic threat to Italy. However, Marius's ruthlessness lay not only in battle but in politics. His control over his legions made him a power broker in Rome, leading to a bitter rivalry with Lucius Cornelius Sulla. This personal feud escalated into civil war, a precedent that would haunt the Republic in the decades to come. While Marius died before the final collapse of the Republic, his military reforms outlived him, setting the stage for future strongmen like Julius Caesar to leverage personal armies for political dominance. His vision of a professional army ensured Rome's military supremacy for centuries, but it also planted the seeds of internal instability that would ultimately dismantle the Republic. If Gaius Marius redefined the Roman army, his one-time protege turned bitter rival, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, demonstrated how military power could be used to dominate politics entirely. Born into a patrician family that had fallen on hard times, Sulla possessed both aristocratic pride and a dangerous ambition. He earned his early military fame during the Juguthine War, where his diplomatic cunning brought the conflict to a close, much to Marius's annoyance. Sulla's true rise came during the Social War, 91 to 88 BCE, when Rome's Italian allies rebelled to demand citizenship rights. His tactical brilliance shone in this brutal conflict. Sulla employed relentless sieges, rapid strikes, and psychological warfare to crush resistance, earning the prestigious Grass Crown, Rome's highest military honor for saving an entire legion from destruction. But it was the war against Mithridates VI of Pontus that triggered his most infamous move. When the Senate initially granted him command, Marius and his allies maneuvered to have it reassigned. Sulla's response was unprecedented. He marched his legions on Rome itself in 88 BCE, the first time in history a Roman army had entered the city under arms. This was no symbolic show of force. Sulla seized control, declared his enemies outlaws, and reasserted his command before marching east to fight Mithridates. In the east, Sulla displayed his ruthless efficiency. He recaptured Athens after a brutal siege in which starvation and disease decimated the city's population. His victory at the Battle of Chaeronea crushed Mithridates' forces and restored Roman dominance in the region. Yet even as he campaigned abroad, political enemies at home plotted his downfall. Returning to Italy in 83 BCE, Sulla once again marched on Rome, this time engaging in a full-scale civil war. His forces, hardened by eastern campaigns, decisively defeated the Marian faction at the Battle of the Colline Gate. The aftermath was bloody. Sulla initiated proscriptions, publicly listing enemies whose properties were confiscated and whose lives were forfeit. Thousands perished in these politically motivated purges. As dictator, Sulla enacted sweeping constitutional reforms to strengthen the Senate and curb the powers of the tribunes. While these changes temporarily stabilized the Republic, they also entrenched the precedent that military force could determine political power. Sulla retired voluntarily in 79 BCE, an unusual move for a man of his authority, but the damage was done. He had shown future leaders exactly how to use armies to seize Rome itself. Pompey's career began under the shadow of Sulla's dictatorship, but his ambition quickly propelled him beyond any mentor. Nicknamed Magnus the Great by his troops, Pompey's campaign spanned 3 continents and showcased a blend of audacity, speed, and political acumen that made him one of Rome's most celebrated generals. Pompey first made his mark during Sulla's civil war, raising his own private army at the age of 23 and delivering decisive victories for the dictator. His early loyalty earned him rapid promotion, but it was his independent campaigns that cemented his reputation. Sent to suppress a rebellion in Sicily and North Africa, he moved with astonishing speed, restoring Roman control in mere months. His triumphal return to Rome without holding a formal magistracy was a sign of his exceptional standing. One of Pompey's most famous achievements was his campaign against the Mediterranean pirates in 67 BCE. At the time, piracy threatened Rome's grain supply and trade routes. Granted extraordinary powers by the Lex Gabinia, Pompey divided the Mediterranean into sectors, deploying fleets to each simultaneously. In a mere 40 days, he cleared the Western Sea, and within 3 months, piracy was virtually eradicated, an astonishing logistical and strategic feat. Pompey's eastern campaigns were even more ambitious. He inherited the war against Mithridates VI from Lucius Licinius Lucullus and pursued the Pontic king relentlessly, driving him into exile and consolidating Roman control over Asia Minor. He then reorganized the region, creating new provinces and establishing client kingdoms that would serve as buffers against eastern threats. His annexation of Syria and intervention in Judea further extended Rome's reach, bringing the empire to the borders of the Parthian realm. But, like so many great Roman generals, Pompey's political career was entangled with his military one. His alliance with Julius Caesar and Marcus Licinius Crassus in the First Triumvirate gave him unparalleled influence, yet tensions soon surfaced. When Caesar's growing power threatened his own, Pompey sided with the Senate, setting the stage for the civil war that would decide the fate of the Republic. Defeated by Caesar at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BCE, Pompey fled to Egypt, where he met a tragic end, assassinated on the orders of Pharaoh Ptolemy XIII. His severed head was presented to Caesar, a grim reminder of how swiftly fortune could turn in Rome's ruthless world. Pompey's legacy was one of unmatched expansion. He had secured Rome's dominance over the Mediterranean, extended its influence deep into the east, and demonstrated the speed and precision with which a determined commander could remake the geopolitical map. Yet his fall also illustrated a recurring truth in Roman history, that in a system where military power equaled political power, yesterday's conqueror could become tomorrow's casualty. The five generals we have explored, Julius Caesar, Scipio Africanus, Gaius Marius, Lucius Cornelius Sulla, and Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, were not merely warriors. They were architects of empire whose decisions shaped the destiny of Rome for centuries. Each operated in different eras, faced different enemies, and pursued different ambitions. Yet they shared an unshakable drive to expand Rome's power at any cost. Taken together, their campaigns stretched Rome's reach from the windswept highlands of Britannia to the sun-baked deserts of North Africa, from the forests of Germania to the ancient cities of the Near East. These were not minor territorial adjustments, they were tectonic shifts in the political and cultural map of the known world. Conquered territories were not simply occupied, they were transformed. Roman roads, aqueducts, forums, and laws reshaped local societies, binding them into the web of an ever-growing empire. But these generals also changed the balance of power within Rome itself. Military success translated into political dominance, and political dominance often depended on personal loyalty from the legions. Marius's reforms had professionalized the army, making soldiers more loyal to their commanders than to the Senate. Sulla had demonstrated that a general could march on Rome and take control of the state by force. Pompey and Caesar had shown that alliances between ambitious leaders could temporarily stabilize power, but could just as easily descend into civil war. The ruthlessness of these men cannot be overstated. Their willingness to annihilate enemies, massacre populations, and impose harsh reprisals was not a byproduct of war, it was a deliberate strategy to instill fear and ensure obedience. And yet, their charisma, generosity to their troops, and undeniable competence inspired loyalty that outlasted their deaths. Their combined legacies created a Rome that was both stronger and more fragile. Stronger because its military machine had never been more disciplined, its territory never more vast, and its prestige never higher. But fragile because the precedent had been set. The path to supreme political power lay through military command, and the army's loyalty could be the deciding factor in Rome's governance. The stories of Rome's most ruthless generals are not just ancient history, they are case studies in power, leadership, and human ambition that resonate even today. The qualities that define them, strategic brilliance, adaptability, political cunning, remain essential for leaders in any age. But so too do the dangers they embodied. Over-reliance on personal loyalty, the temptation to bypass lawful authority, and the corrosive effect of power wielded without restraint. In military academies around the world, the tactics of Caesar, Scipio, and Marius are still studied for their ingenuity. Scipio's feigned retreats at Zama, Caesar's double fortifications at Alesia, Marius's organizational reforms, these maneuvers and policies continue to offer lessons in adaptability and innovation. Sulla's and Pompey's campaigns reveal the importance of logistics, rapid deployment, and the careful management of alliances. Yet their legacies also serve as cautionary tales. Sulla's proscriptions and Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon highlight the dangers of military power overriding civil authority. The repeated pattern of civil wars in Rome's later history was a direct consequence of the precedents these men set. The empire they built was vast and impressive, but its internal political instability would eventually erode its foundations. Culturally, their conquests accelerated the spread of Roman law, architecture, and language, laying much of the groundwork for Western civilization. Latin became the lingua franca of an enormous portion of the ancient world. Roman engineering connected distant provinces, and the concept of citizenship began to transcend ethnicity, ideas that still shape political thought today. Perhaps the most enduring lesson is the dual nature of ruthlessness. For these generals, it was a tool that delivered victory, instilled fear, and secured short-term stability. But over the long term, the very same ruthlessness bred resentment, resistance, and cycles of revenge. Leaders who study their lives must ask themselves not only how to win, but how to build a peace that endures beyond their own lifetimes. In the end, the 5 most ruthless Roman generals were not merely conquerors, they were agents of transformation. They expanded borders, redefined military strategy, and altered the very structure of Roman politics. Their triumphs made Rome the greatest power of its age, and their legacies continue to influence the way we think about leadership, ambition, and the complex, often dangerous interplay between military might and political authority.